That's the Sunday Papers. Now, next up here in the studio, former Human Rights Commissioner, now Liberal backbencher Tim Wilson. While he joins us, here's how Penny Wong and the Liberals' Dean Smith responded to the vote.
This is the most personal of debates because it is about the people who matter most to us. It is about the people we love. So I say to Sophie, thank you for your love and commitment and for all you do. And I say to our beautiful daughters, Alexandra and Hannah, I work for and fight for the world I want for you.
And I never believed the day would come when my relationship would be judged by my country to be as meaningful and valued as any other. The Australian people have proven me wrong.
Tim Wilson, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Barry.
Well, that's what it meant to Penny Wong and Dean Smith. What did it mean to you?
Well, Dean actually reflected very much my sentiments. I was in the chamber when he gave that speech, and I'm not going to try and pretend that there was a tear in my eye. But there are a number of things. There's obviously a personal implication. It's a very emotional week and it's been a great week. But politically and more broadly, it's also the opportunity to move on. It's an issue that I care passionately about, like Penny, like Dean does. And there are many other issues, just like my parliamentary colleagues, Trent Zimmerman, Trev Evans, Dean Smith and Warren Inch. We got elected to serve our constituencies and we're looking forward to the opportunity to resolve this issue and to be able to move on as a country.
Yeah, I can understand in one respect why you do want to move on from the issue. There was a survey at the weekend from LGBTI community, and it showed that 4 out of 5 people said that they'd had some adverse effect from this. They talked about anguish, about worry, about discrimination. How tough was it for you?
Well, I think I was in a better position than most to deal with it, obviously because of my age and the fact that I've been involved with the debate for a long period of time. But I'm not going to try and pretend that at 9:59 or thereabouts last Wednesday there was an incredible amount of anxiety about the result. But the emphatic result, the landslide result delivered by the Australian people, I think was worth fighting for. It was a result that can unite the country and recognise that as a country we've made an active choice now to be one that embraces all people treated equally with dignity under the law.
Was it just anxiety about the result, though, or was it more than that? Did you come under a bit of pressure internally?
There was anxiety about the result, but some of us took risks to put this issue back onto the agenda so that it could be resolved, not just for the country, not just for ourselves, but also politically this year, and that was a gamble. It has paid off, but it is one where I think the government has got the benefit of that, the Australian people have got the benefit of that, and obviously there's a benefit to us because take Trevor Evans, the member for Brisbane. He got into Parliament to fight for small business. He can now do that. Trent Zimmerman got elected to fight on infrastructure and ports and tourism. He can now do that. I got elected because I'm interested in tax reform and healthcare reform. Now we're able to do those things.
Now, I'm sure it didn't escape your attention that marginally, just marginally, but the yes vote was stronger in Liberal seats than Labor seats. Do you think many in the Liberal Party saw that coming?
I think some people did see that coming, but some perhaps more than others. I wasn't surprised by that result at all. In fact, in the lead up to this debate, I sat down and spoke at length to my branch members about the feedback I was getting on the ground, and it was that we're support somewhere in the 70s plus. In the end, last Wednesday, I found out 76.3% of Goldstein residents supported a change in the law. So I don't think anyone should be surprised. In fact, in some of the seats where we were told it would be 50-50, it was more in the vicinity of 60 plus. So it's quite clear the Australian people are sending a message, but it's not just a message on the issue. It's also a message on the Parliament to get on with it, not just on this issue, but on lots of issues so that we can take the country forward.
Yeah, and more than that, though, does it just reflect this issue, or does it tell you that maybe Liberal voters are very different? There might be a disconnect between Liberal voters and Liberal members, and that they're actually more socially progressive than they're given credit for?
Well, I think Liberal voters are culturally conservative, but that doesn't mean you have to be a social conservative. I'm a cultural cultural conservative, but I'm actually a social liberal. And I think it highlights that we do need to make sure we're always connected to our communities, and we need to be listening. I know I sent out a community survey to the Goldstein electorate and asked them to rank their priorities, and I included marriage for same-sex couples as part of it, and not many people ticked the box. But when you got down to the bottom in the comments section, people often wrote SSM, fix it, get on with it. I think this became a critical issue for democracy in this country, and being able to deliver it now is a great achievement of the government.
But does it tell you something about the Liberal base? For example, when the Prime Minister is taking on the right wing occasionally on the policy front and is challenged by them, should this inform his thinking?
Well, it should absolutely inform all of our thinking about how we're going to go forward as a forward-looking, modern Liberal party and Liberal government. What we need to do is make sure we're connected to our communities and understand what they're saying. And I think what they're actually saying is that they want us to address these issues, not to get hung up on them, as Sir Robert Menzies said, not die in a ditch when you have a difference of opinion. Recognise that if you want to shape the future, you actually have to lead it and chart it. And that's where I think the government should be heading. That's where it is heading, and I'm looking forward to 2018.
And how does this impact on the influence of Tony Abbott, for example? Because he didn't want the postal survey. What he wanted was the party to insist on the plebiscite, even though it was being knocked back by the Parliament, and then he was right out in front on campaigning for the no vote. Will it impact on his influence?
Well, everybody had different issues on this debate at different times. You know, in the end, Malcolm Turnbull argued against the postal survey, but in the end went through and delivered, and is now going to go on and deliver marriage for same-sex couples. Of course, some people's stocks will rise or fall, but I really think we need to be focusing on the next generation of Liberals who are actually going to chart and shape the future of this country.
Yeah,
I mean, they're the people who are going to influence the direction.
And Tony Abbott, of course, as one thing that he's always had going for him, he can run a decent negative campaign.
He can absolutely run a decent negative campaign, but on this occasion it wasn't successful. And that was because of a fundamental misunderstanding by the No campaign throughout this whole debate. Their focus was in thinking if they could sow enough doubt that they would be able to change people's minds. But for every time somebody sowed doubt, there was a connection back to somebody they knew. I said to the No campaign many times that to win this vote, you have to get my mother to vote against me. Now, I don't think you're going to be able to do that. And that's why they were unsuccessful, and that's what the result clearly shows.
Because it touched on so many families, not just your own.
Exactly. Around the country we had, whether it was brothers and sisters or children, co-workers, families or friends. The situation in my family is there's one of me, and then they've got mother, father, brother, sister, uncles, aunties, cousins, and it's being replicated everywhere across this great nation.
Now, Scott Morrison is quoted this morning as saying that he wants a bill that will work for 100% of Australians. Given the nature of this debate, is that at all possible?
Well, I think we should welcome Scott Morrison's involvement in the discussion, because what he's talked very strongly about is the need not to give licence to extremism as part of this legislation. But it's very hard to comment on the detail, because at the moment we've just got reports in newspapers. It's ultimately going to come down to what the parliamentary writers are going to be able to say, or drafters are going to be able to say can be included in legislation. I see a lot of claims of things people want to see in the Marriage Act, but I have concerns that they may not be constitutional, because in the end, the federal parliament is given the power around marriage, not actually to then use that as a vehicle to licence other behaviour or override the states.
Yeah, for example, the schools policy, this suggestion that if schools start teaching children that the same-sex marriage is legal in this country, that would then entitle them to take their children out of the classroom.
Well, I think they're going to find that might be a strong intervention into the power of the states to decide how to run state schools, as well as they're ultimately responsible for the curriculum. So let's wait and see what's put on the table. Let's see what's drafted. And of course, there'll be reasonable consideration. But Trent Zimmerman, Trevor Evans, myself, Dean Smith, Warren Inch will consider all of these amendments with the rest of the Parliament once we've seen what's actually drafted.
And is there a prospect that all of this can be separated out and debated separately, perhaps next year?
Well, I think people have got to be very careful about going down that path. I'm somebody who's always been against a Charter of Rights, because it takes us down the European social model of the government permitting freedom rather than a Liberal democratic path, which is that freedom is the default and the government makes things illegal or unlawful if we cross a line. And where this discussion around having an extra protection around religious freedom takes us is towards a charter or a Bill of Rights. It's an oddity to see many people who identify as conservative or socially conservative, who have traditionally opposed a Bill of Rights or Charter of Rights, now prosecuting this cause.
So, throwing ahead, if the bill goes through as you think it would, between now and Christmas, though, will there be changes to the bill to the point where people won't feel the same excitement that they did on the day that the vote went through?
I don't think so, Barry. Ultimately, the coalition can't change the legislation in its own right. It has to work with other parties in the House and the Senate to be able to get an amendment. But the key objective of this vote was to get the Marriage Act changed, and that is what we're seeking to deliver. Now, as I said, I'm quite happy to discuss other amendments once they're drafted. I know my colleagues are as well, because we do agree very strongly. I'm one of the strongest advocates for religious liberty in the Parliament, but it's hard to have a discussion around the detail of it when you haven't actually seen what's been drafted.
Thanks for coming this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.